Hey everyone, great to see you all. Thank you so much for joining today. We're so excited to be joined by David Cash, the director of the Climate Action Accelerator at the Salata Institute for Climate and Sustainability at Harvard University, who'll be presenting today on linking knowledge to practice to accelerate climate action. Prior to joining Harvard, Dr. Cash served as the regional administrator for the United States Environmental Protection Agency's New England office during the Biden administration. Dr. Cash has spent his career in public service harnessing science, innovative policy, and community involvement to help solve challenges and seize opportunities at the intersection of equity, environmental protection, public health, and economic development. Before joining the EPA, Dr. Cash was Dean of the McCormick Graduate School of Policy and Global Studies at UMass Boston, and where he was on the team that launched the Sustainable Solutions Lab. So we're so happy to be joined by Dr. Cash today, and David, please take it away.
Great. Thanks so much, Joe. It's great to be here. It's great to see a whole bunch of friends and colleagues on the list here. It's just fabulous. It would be great, since I know part of these kinds of meetings is to support and help our networks grow. If everybody can in the chat, everybody can go into the chat. Is that right, Alexis? People can.
Yep. Everybody has chat.
So just pop your, who you are, your affiliation in the chat, so people have eyes on that. That would be great. It's awesome to see Bob and Gabriella and Peter. Peter, how good to see you. Phil and Sonia. I know there are a whole bunch of other folks here, but it's really great to see folks at the community here. So excellent. All right, let me share my screen and get going here. All right, it's looking like that's working. Right, Joe? Thumbs up?
Yep, we got you. Thank you.
Excellent. By the way, Joe, I really appreciated my, your traveling introduction to me. I felt like I was on like a game show. It's awesome.
A little bit of a noisy office, so wanted to make sure to relocate.
Yeah. Fantastic. All right. So as it's particularly great to be here at this. As Joe mentioned, I was on the team that launched the Sustainable Solutions Lab. I was on a team in the periphery, though, of helping folks like Paul and Bob and others put together the Living Lab proposal and all that kind of stuff. And just to see the Stone Living Lab as such a exemplar of how to link research and action and government and community with a through line of equity is just so exciting to see. And I see my time at UMass Boston as a building block to where I am now. In between UMass Boston and where I am now, as Joe mentioned, I was the EPA regional administrator. So again, really focusing on the same kind of issues that the Living Lab is really focused on. But I'm here today to talk about the Climate Action Accelerator and the Salata Institute for Climate and Sustainability, which the accelerator is a part of. If you want to, I don't have great access, it looks like, since I'm monitoring the screen here to questions and things like that folks might be putting in the chat. But I'm happy to be interrupted if folks have them. And Joe, you could maybe interrupt me or something like that if there's a burning question out there. But there will definitely be time for questions at the end with 15 or 20 minutes to go. So
that sounds great, David. We'll do.
So let me jump right in and describe first the institute and then the accelerator a little bit more in depth. So the Salata Institute is designed to solve problems that are inherent with any kind of university that's trying to research and understand and provide solutions for the kinds of complex, wicked, whatever you want to call them, kinds of problems that require multiple disciplines to understand and multiple disciplines to develop solutions for. And That's one thing, by the way, the Sustainable Solutions Lab was designed for. There was a reason that I believe at the beginning, Bob, you can correct me, I think 4 deans were the founding deans, and the idea was to make sure that the work that the Sustainable Solutions Lab had the right kind of disciplines together to integrate to solve problems that are at the intersection of justice, of economy, of environment, of sustainability. And so the Institute, the Salata Institute, was created 4 years ago with a very generous gift of $200 million. That's an endowed gift. And the idea was to provide the right kind of platform and the right kind of incentives for faculty to work together. I'll describe some of the research projects, but essentially the funding from the Institute's endowment is used to provide these pretty large grants for faculty who come together, multidisciplinary teams crossing across multiple schools at Harvard with a solution-oriented research project. And I'll talk about some of those. And it's been quite successful. It's broken down the silos that are inherent in universities and really created what the part of the vision has been, which is essentially a hub of climate and sustainability work on campus, pulling in all of the different schools and all different disciplines. And the ultimate goal, as noted here, is to advance durable, effective, and equitable solutions to climate change challenges. And again, I'll give you some examples of that. But it's been pretty successful 3 to 4 years in, and we have 10 large research projects. We have convened all manner of different stakeholders, from large-scale events to small backroom, quiet convenings, and I'll talk again more about that because that's right at the heart of what the accelerator does. But the Institute itself has been a game changer on campus, which has been great. And it seeks to connect with other universities. We have formal collaborations with MIT. I've already reached out to folks at UMass. There might be opportunities there. We've worked with everything from universities in Georgia to the UC system to institutes that are in Europe as well, to institutes, as I'll also describe, in Nigeria and Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire and a variety of different universities in India. So let me explain a little bit about what the accelerator does. So the focus of the accelerator is designed to solve another problem that's inherent in universities, which is how do you have an impact outside the university itself, right? Because again, the faculty who are on this call will note that particularly early in their career, the publish or perish notion is real. And the more you publish in niche, highly specialized journals, the better it is. But those are also farther and farther away from the kinds of outputs that a decision maker would need, whether the decision maker is in government or in business or in communities. These are those are not the kind of outputs. And so part of the accelerator's job, which was funded separately, but is part of the Institute, is to work with faculty to try to figure out how to have an impact outside. So obviously one big key is to support the kind of applied research that can have impact outside. Funding and supporting stakeholder convenings, again, whether in government, business, community groups, municipalities, states, et cetera. And part of the idea is to do that early in the process so that those kinds of interventions can help scope the research. So essentially the research then can be answering the kinds of questions that decision makers want instead of based on the curiosity of the researchers themselves. So that's been pretty critically important, kind of thinking really strategically when and how and who is brought to interact with the faculty is a real important strategic effort. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. And so for this last bullet here, that better ensures that the research is shaped by stakeholders and that the products that are then the result of the research can better drive progress in reducing emissions, saving lives, adapting to climate change, et cetera. So that's the role of the accelerator. We obviously work very closely with the research teams. Essentially, I have almost no staff, but I work with all the staff from the Salata Institute, which is communication staff, events staff, and we have a development team for fundraising to move forward some of our efforts in fundraising. So let me give you some, and so we're at the tail end of a strategic planning exercise that brought together all of our staff, many of the faculty that work within Salata, external stakeholders, students as well. And part of this process has helped identify the variety of different roles that we can play, that the accelerator can play. So one is this coach role, and that's actually turning out to be a kind of fundamental part of how we see things. In other words, what I would like to see is as each new research project begins, that's through Salata, we would sit down with the research team if we need to bring in outside expertise, but essentially develop a research impact plan. And so, again, many academics and researchers will be familiar with coming up with a research plan that has a timeline of when, data is collected and analysis is complete and things are published, et cetera. But this would be a plan that essentially says, okay, what's your end goal? Are you hoping to influence government in legislation? Are you hoping to change how businesses make decisions? Are you trying to empower communities to allocate resources that can help them be more resilient? Whatever the end goal is, then the question is to work back and who do you need to bring at the table when? What's the strategic pathway to do that? And are these meetings public? Are they open? Are they quiet? Are they informal? Are they inclusive? Are they exclusive? Those are all the kinds of questions that are critically important as you're thinking about how you move forward. I'll give some examples of that as well when I talk about specific projects. So that's kind of one role. Another role is this broker. So we can figure out how to best connect researchers with stakeholders, and whether that's through kind of connections I have, but that's just a pretty narrow space that we're working in. But it's not hard to figure out how you can develop a network of people that you can then broker between the researchers and the stakeholders, all with the idea of building trust, potentially creating partnerships or collaboration. And one of the things that I've come to really see is the notion of piggybacking on existing networks. So, for example, some of you may know I was a public utilities commissioner in Massachusetts. I was part of an organization called NARUC, which is the National Association of Regulatory Utility Commissioners, mouthful of a name. But, we have a team that's working on electric vehicles and electric vehicle infrastructure deployment. And so one of our possibilities is how can we piggyback on a network like NARUC? How can we use the connections and the relationships that I have and many others have so that our research team may be able to enter into relationships with an already existing kind of network. So that's part of the broker role. The convener role is bringing people together for multiple goals and figuring out how to do that in a way that can best support the stakeholders' goals and the researchers' ability to do their research. It's not a surprise. Many universities are really good at convening. And we have, deep and extensive connections, both domestically and internationally, for us to bring people together. And the convenings can serve a variety of different kinds of functions. And then finally is this role as consultant. And I will say this is probably one of the more difficult roles for universities because the incentives are not aligned for consulting. And when I say consulting, it would mean being able to turn around a research report or a policy paper or a memo relatively quickly, because the incentives in a university are designed to support faculty who do long-term research, who publish in research journals and things like that. And so being agile is really difficult. In fact, I can relate two stories to you, one from my UMass time and one from my first week here at Harvard. When I first got my job at UMass, I got a call within a week or two from a state senator who was a leader in doing climate change. And he was like, "Oh, it's so great that you're at UMass Boston now. Can you pull together a report on the deployment of wind and solar in New England and how much it might cost? And can you do that in 3 weeks because we're having a hearing in the next month?" And at the time, I will say, somewhat naively, I said, "Yes, of course." That's precisely what I was interested in kind of crafting for the McCormick Graduate School, is some kind of ability to do that. And this was in, I think, July or something like that. And I didn't really think that, like, okay, faculty are out doing their summer research or are on vacation and they are getting ready for their fall classes and they don't have time to do, a kind of study like this. And I actually ended up hiring a doctoral student who it happened to be his area of expertise. And I hired an outside consulting firm to help me with this. So the UMass Boston expertise wasn't really utilized to the degree that I was hoping to. Pretty much a similar thing happened my first week at Harvard. I got a call from a high-ranking official in the Healy administration who was hoping I could turn around a report on energy efficiency that could really help them in their plans and their policy development. And I went back to the faculty. This time I was a little smarter, and I said, "I'm not really sure I can do that." And in fact, I could not do that. We just didn't have the ability to turn things around quickly. Now, there are institutional structures that could help with that. We could have set up a program with a stable of students on the students' timeline, or there are rare cases in which a faculty member has done a wide enough series of reports and in-depth so that she could turn around a quick report because she had already done the research. But seems really difficult to institutionalize that kind of role to be played. And I'm pretty sure that the Sustainable Solution Lab has also struggled with that kind of challenge. Okay, so let me give you some real world examples of some of the research projects and some of the activities that the accelerator has undertaken to assist in making a difference. So, and by the way, these research clusters are on our website. You can go there, and I'm only going to tell you 3 or 4 of them, but there are about 10 that are the big clusters. We have smaller research projects as well. So one of them is called the Global Climate Policy Project at Harvard and MIT. This is where we have a really good collaboration with MIT. And these folks are primarily looking at what's called a Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, a CBAM. And basically, this is a kind of national tariff or tax that taxes incoming products so that there's a level playing field, right? The example is if you're a country that's very efficient and you have a steel industry that's highly efficient, you don't want to be undercut by a steel industry from another country that's using cheap coal. Right? That's not a level playing field. So a carbon border adjustment mechanism allows for the kind of equaling of the playing field, and it gets emissions advantages. So complicated stuff requires a lot of analysis to figure out how it will work. And some of you may recall at the Brazil Conference of Parties, you can see this article on the right that the Brazil government announced this, what's called the Open Coalition to look at these kind of carbon markets. And it was 18 countries plus the EU, so a pretty sizable chunk. And what was pretty amazing about this project is that the researchers had spent 2 years creating relationships, building trust with the important players in other in countries, including in Brazil, so that by the time the Brazil Conference of the Parties happened, the relationships were established already. The underpinning analysis was there. Countries were comfortable that they knew what would happen if certain kinds of tariff programs were put in place. And so there was this, coalition that had built well before it was actually announced. And so really strategic ways that the faculty here and at MIT and at other places had worked together to establish the relationships well before a decision was going to be made and do the kind of research that a Ministry of Finance would want done. So real strategic planning in how the impact of the work could best be maximized. So that's one project. Another project is looking at adaptation in South Asia. It's primarily been focusing on extreme heat. And if you're interested, there was a New York Times article. Sorry, I don't know. I can't remember the date, a couple of months ago. And what this team, so this is a team that includes, by the way, this team for the Global Climate Policy Project includes economists, policy experts, engineers, and government experts, international development experts, sectoral experts as well. So again, hearkening on the theme of projects like this needing to be interdisciplinary. So this team has MDs, public health experts, sociologists, climatologists, and meteorologists. And basically, one of the ways that they've moved forward with this is they're trying to figure out data tools, intense data tools that municipalities can use and individuals can use to protect them from extreme heat events. And they began with contacts that they had in Delhi, in India, and they early on established relationships with a women's union in the informal work sectors. So these are women who work in the markets, which are outside, exposed, and women, as you can see in this picture, who work in textiles or tailoring in these, buildings that don't have air conditioning, et cetera. And the whole purpose of connecting with the union, remember I said building on networks, piggybacking on networks, it would be hard for a Harvard researcher, even if they had partners in India, which they did, to make relationships, create relationships of trust, because what they wanted to do was work with the women in the union to have them wear monitors that would monitor temperature and humidity, and to wear something like a Fitbit so they could monitor health impacts like heart rates and sweating and all kinds of things like that. And the union then became the kind of intermediary because, of course, the union was trusted by the workers. And our research team worked really closely developing long-term relationship and trust with the union itself. And so what ensued was an incredible data collection that, for one thing, exposed that the meteorological data of, that said like, oh, it was 102 degrees in Delhi, actually what wasn't appropriate for understanding what the lived experience was, because for many of these people, wherever they were situated, they were on hot black pavement or in a room without air conditioning, those temperatures would be much higher. And so that was one of the things that came out of it. But what also came out was a pretty incredible on-the-ground impacts. And I'm just going to give you one example. This, of course, is designed to drive municipal changes in things like response or hospital responses, but it's also for individuals. So I heard a story from one of the researchers that one of the women in the program who was wearing a Fitbit one morning woke up and, because of her Fitbit, noticed that she had a high heart rate. And it's the kind of heart rate where she would not have noticed if she had not seen the Fitbit. It's not something you can feel in your body. And rushed off to the hospital and had an intervention in the hospital that might have saved her life. And, that's the kind of things that we're trying to figure out, how research that's heavily requiring data could connect on the ground with real people who are struggling with resilience and adaptation challenges. So that's one, and you could hear from the story, just like that first story, came from building trusted relationships with those who the research was intended to impact. Let me give you another adaptation story. We have another team that's looking at coastal erosion, sea level rise, and flooding in the Gulf of Guinea, and looking at the three countries there, Nigeria, Ghana, and Cote d'Ivoire. And I've been working really closely. This team here, it's led by a researcher here with close connections with researchers in Nigeria. And they have brought to the table both academics in those three countries and decision makers, whether these are national decision makers who are working on coastal zone issues or municipal decision makers who are working on local coastal flooding, erosion, development, et cetera. And they have charted, again, their first effort was to just say what the state of the coastal zone was, how it's been changing over time, how it might be projected to change in the future. And again, this is already at the end of its 3-year term, but early on created the kinds of relationships that were critically important for there to be trust to be built, so that whatever kind of data analysis was coming from the team would be trusted. May or may not be used, but it would increase the chance that it would be used if the trust was there. And by the way, I should have mentioned this, because that first effort, the carbon markets effort, and this effort, both have used models. And models, whether it's mapping or some kind of graphical interface, is a superb tool to build trust, particularly if you approach stakeholders in such a way that they can contribute to the building of the model, that their experience and their information and their local data can be used in the building of the model. And that's precisely what was happening here. Those are 3 examples of research projects. I want to give you one more example that comes from the extreme heat, because because part of the goal of the accelerator is to provide this credible, nonpartisan platform for discussion. This was a picture taken the last time we did our Harvard Climate Action Week. That's a week-long kind of summit. The extreme heat team is also developing a whole series of simulations, and they invited from 8 US cities the analog of a chief of resilience or a heat officer. Many cities have these now, where they could run simulations. I believe they were using a simulation based on a heat event in Phoenix, Arizona, where through the tools that they've developed and the software of data and mapping tools, they run through the simulation with the folks that are participating, and can basically come up with a guidebook that a chief of heat can go back to their city with. So really exciting and dynamic kind of way that the research can be parlayed into a platform that can be of a lot of utility to a municipal decision maker in this case. One of our other beyond the specific research projects, is holding events for the general public. Some of you may have participated in some of these. They're designed to showcase not just our research, but research that's important for this whole sphere, and also to be an opportunity to have difficult conversations. We know that there are difficult conversations here. I continually see these kind of large conferences as also an opportunity to bring leaders together, both in these big events like in this picture, but in sidebar conversations for there to be the potentially more informal, but deeper dives into kinds of things, kinds of issues that are really important. So why don't I stop there, and I could unshare my screen here, and happy to take questions. And we have almost a half hour, so this should be happy to take both, help me understand this questions or critiques or whatever.
David, thank you so much. That was absolutely fantastic. And yeah,
Awesome.
happy to jump into questions. So folks can either use the raise hand function here, or drop the question in the chat, and we're happy to read it on your behalf if you're not in a position to be able to be doing that yourself. So let's
I
kick it
think
off.
I can read now because I'm not presenting. So
Oh, nice. Cool. Um, any
David,
raised
thank you so
hands?
much for your presentation.
hey
Really exciting
Bob,
work. Good to see you.
are
I was
you like
wondering,
sitting on the beach? Bob, are you like on the beach or something?
it's Vieques, Puerto Rico, yeah, in the
Very
mud.
nice, very nice.
Um, you faculty are notoriously difficult to tell what to do, and so your
You
idea
said
about
that, not me, but I'm not going to disagree.
I did say that, and getting stakeholders to drive the research questions is difficult. How
Yeah.
do you have some tricks of the trade, or what has been your experience at engaging faculty at Harvard in these
Yeah,
stakeholder-driven projects?
yeah. So some of this is going to be hypothetical because I've only been here 4 months, but I definitely have ideas, right? So one of them is things like that have to be baked in, has to be baked into the incentive that we're creating. So these cluster research grants, these large research grants, and this was before my time, um, do have parts of them that push faculty to do research that's solution oriented. I haven't looked back at the original RFPs to see if they're very explicit about it. But let me give you an example of a grant program that I'm going to launch as a pilot next year. And I'm calling it a research action grants. And these will require a faculty member and a stakeholder to be co-PIs. So baked into the grant will be the requirement that a researcher and a decision maker of some sort would have to work together. That's one. The other is another idea that I have, which is I'm not sure when or how this is going to take off, but this would solve part of the problem. So one of the things that I'm considering is again leaning on networks. Is imagine a conference in which we pull together the leaders of environmental justice networks, not of each individual group, but of networks. That way we get a kind of baked in ability to go at scale. And we invited them to come to campus. And then I pulled together, I know Gabriella's here, who I think is directing this kind of EJ network of researchers that are in the Boston area. I haven't even told Gabriella about this, but let's imagine we invited, 30 of those folks and they're in the same conference. And we spend the first part of it with the EJ folks saying, oh, here's our needs. We need to understand how housing intersects with whatever. And then the faculty who are invited are like, oh, I'm an economist. Oh, I'm a housing specialist. Oh, I'm a transportation planner. I'm whatever it is. And then we have like a speed dating thing where they match up and perhaps a grant is given to, the teams that have great ideas with impacts. Okay. So they're baked into that too. I mean, what you're hearing now, Bob, is like this has to be institutionalized. There has to be a way to institutionalize that because it's not part of the incentive structure for faculty right now, right? So you have to create that structure. And whether it's in a requirement in a proposal or a new kind of grant program, I think those are the ways that we're trying to figure this out. And I will say with the I mentioned that role that I'm considering as coach. So when I'm sitting down with faculty, and by the way, there are a lot of faculty who already do this, like Professor Chen or Paul Kirshen, or there are just tons who already do this kind of stuff, right? At my university, I mentioned him because he was on my committee, my PhD committee. Rob Stavins, an environmental economist, he's been doing this for 40 years. He knows what, but there are a lot of faculty who don't. So by sitting down with them and requiring them to do a research action plan, it would come up like, okay, how are you considering having your research driven by the problem you're trying to solve? So I think that's a long way to answer your question.
Awesome. Thanks, David.
Thanks, David. We got a couple of good ones in the chat. You want to take them from Shannon and John?
Hold on a minute, Shannon. Are you also engaging with Harvard's Kennedy School? Yeah. So I should have mentioned this at the beginning. The Salata Institute is cross-university. It's one of these great things that comes from the president's office. So all of the schools, including the Kennedy School, are part of the Salata Institute. And, we have faculty, we have a faculty steering committee of about 15 faculty some from the Kennedy School, some from the business school, some from the Department of Economics, some from the natural sciences, some from the humanities. And then we have about 300 affiliated faculty from all over the university. So yes, we are definitely engaging the Kennedy School. And let's see. Oh, how much of an impact is AI having on interpreting? Whoa. I don't know. That was a short answer. I don't. I'm not in the research space. I'm not a researcher anymore, and I don't know how AI is being used. It's a great question. Yeah. So I don't. We're not encouraging increased use of AI. The only way we have an intersection with AI is that we're doing research on kind of the implications to the energy system on AI use and trying to understand kind of transmission and grid infrastructure and energy use related to data centers and that kind of stuff, and the permitting and siting of data centers. So that's the only angle on AI that I'm aware of. Oh, that's from John. Hey, John. Good to see you.
Good seeing you.
Thanks, David. I see Paul's hand up.
Hey, Paul.
Hi, David. Good to see you. I hope you're
Great
still
to see
running.
you too. By the way, Paul is one of those modelers who used models precisely in that way of engaging with decision makers, so that the phenomenal sea level rise maps that he and his colleagues have created are the kinds that someone like Mayor Wu can use really well. And that's because he had decision makers early and often in the development of that. So
Thank you. It's a very interesting talk. I'm wondering how you measure success of a project. And you have multiple stakeholders. You have the faculty, you have the actual, residents, community members. They all have different metrics of success. And the related question is, obviously, you want these solutions to be scalable. You want them to be sustainable. So how do you try to bake that into these projects, if at all?
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Those are awesome questions, Paul, and we're absolutely struggling with them. I mean, one of the things that we kind of frame our work in is saving tons in lives. At the end of the day, that's what we want to see measured. And as you well know, really, really hard to measure that. So, I'm thinking of the carbon border adjustment mechanism. You could probably, in 5 years, if we got some of those moving forward, you could probably measure that to some degree to show what the impact of these new kinds of tariffs were to reduce emissions. That would be one way. Of course, how much our research team influenced that, they were one of many different kinds of inputs into the negotiations that went on, right? So that's, in some ways, that's one of the easier ones. We could also look at like our EV charging infrastructure programs. And that's another one that you could do some analysis that shows, if you had X amount of deployment of charging infrastructure, that would lead to Y amount of EV adoption, which would mean this reduction of internal combustion engine, and so emissions reductions there, right? Really hard to do. And you'd say then that there's lots of intermediates. So number of chargers deployed would be an example there. So each of our teams is attempting and required to come up with, well, what are your measures?
Okay.
So really, really difficult to do that, but we're attempting to do that. Remind me what the second half of your question was.
How do you bake in the idea of scalability and sustainability?
Oh, yeah, scalability. Great question. So, okay, each research project is going to be really different. I'm sure the Living Lab is really wondering, okay, great. Let's say we figure out how to protect George's Island, does that work in our neighboring islands? Does that work in like San Francisco Bay? Does that work? How do you scale that? It's a really hard question. I'm curious what you think about that. But let me give you, let me, there's some of these where it's a little bit more understandable. Let me just take the EV infrastructure. We are trying to think, how can we have our impacts in a way that will be adopted by many states? We know that, for example, the federal government is not going to do anything on it right now. So we're trying to think, how can we design examples in states that will be adopted by other states and easily scaled in other states? So one example of that is, I'm just looking at the time because I don't want to go too much. It's like there's some legislation that we've been working on that we think can act as model legislation for blue, red, and purple states. And so we are consciously thinking, how can we craft legislation that can be scaled in that kind of way? Here's what I find the more difficult problem. So one of the things that UMass Boston is known for is its engagement with communities, with Boston communities, right? And on Harvard's campus, probably the School of Public Health has done that the best. So imagine a School of Public Health project that's looking at, I'm just going to take heat as an example, because I've been talking about that is working with a community in Roxbury to do something about heat, and they come up with a great plan that's going to be protective of people, and the community's on board, and the School of Public Health is helping. It's a great thing. Okay, is that going to work in Brighton? Is that going to work in Philadelphia? Is that going to work in Delhi? I mean, and how do you scale that? That's the whole thing about community engagement, which we know more and more is so critically important, because you get the reality of people on the ground, then makes it really difficult to scale up. And that's one of the reasons why I've been thinking about networks, because let me give you an example. We're not even close to it, but I've been working with an EJ group in Boston that is planning to create a network of like groups in, I think, 6 southern New England cities. So like Boston, Providence, New Haven, Bridgeport, et cetera. And so if we can be working with that network, then you'll already have, let's say we do something successful. Well, it'll be in 6 cities. That's just one. So I don't know. How do you think about the Stone Living Lab and how replicable, scalable the work that you're doing there is?
Well, I think it's built into our fabric of doing projects. And I think, I don't want to spend too much time, but we've had tremendous success with cobble berms. Right now we started off with a research project at 1 site, and now we have had them at 6 sites, and more communities are interested in this. And we've done that by working with local communities, having workshops, having a lot of success. But I agree, it's the networks which are key to get this scalable. And it's also having, it's not so much cobble berms are going to work in, Louisiana. It's also having the process of how do you work with the communities to have collaborative science. So anyway, I admire your work, and it's great. Thank you for your time.
Oh, absolutely.
Great topics, David and Paul. Thank you. And we have 2 good comments in the chat, one from Gabriella and another from Shannon, that I just want to direct folks to, and then kind of a comment, but kind of a question from Margarita as well. So I'll let you sort of browse those, David.
Okay, great. Yeah. So Gabriella mentioned this network, and exactly, network of folks that love to tap into. Gabriella, as Gabriella I know knows, but many others don't, I'm now on the advisory board at the Sustainable Solutions Lab. So Gabriella, you and I are going to talk a whole lot about this. So awesome. Shannon, working with NGOs seem like good folks interface, get great ideas for. So we have a pretty extensive network of relationships with all manner of NGOs, and your kind of typical EDFs, NRDC, et cetera. Some more that are slightly more academic, like Resources for the Future. I know that we've done some stuff with Rocky Mountain Institute, but we're also looking at kind of more center-right environment groups, because we know so much about the work that we need to do is going to have to be bipartisan in some kind of way. So we're looking at the kind of relationships. You know that as an academic institution, you need to maintain your credibility and your integrity. So really important to establish roles and responsibilities in those relationships. And oh my gosh, is this Margarita Pryor from EPA? Is it? Come on, come on. I can't
Yes,
see you.
it
Are you?
is. Yes, it is.
Hey, how are you?
How are you?
I'm great. I'm great. I love your example here. It, it, this is the kind of thing precisely that is a way to scale, right? Is to bring delegations, or you send delegations to various places. And I think one of the important things about these kind of models is I think it's really important to think about them not just as one-offs, but create the kind of organizational and institutional structure that will just continue on. And it's hard for those of us who have been in federal government, where there had been devotion through many different administrations on creating these kind of relationships, particularly internationally, and those have all essentially gone away. It's really hard to see, but that's something where universities can and should really step up in that regard.
I will say, David, that particular project, part of the cooperative agreement was that there would be sort of mentoring after that initial sort of training and participation
Mm,
process. So it wasn't, as you said, a one-off sort of thing. It went on for a couple years with those participants, and then they were expected to then propagate what they had learned, within their own communities. So
yeah,
it
yeah,
was successful while it lasted, but as you say, some of these things went away.
yeah, yeah. Margarita, are you still at EPA?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay, can everybody send huge thank yous to Margarita for thank you.
I'm not the only
Um,
one. So
Yeah, I know you're not. I know. And yeah, no, that's a good point. Like that hypothetical I described that I'm thinking of the conference. It can't, at one point I was thinking, oh, I'll bring them together. But then I realized, no, there's got to be a follow through. And that's why I thought it has to be connected with a grant that allows the best ideas of collaboration between a researcher and a stakeholder to have a life that goes well beyond the conference. But I could also imagine that conference being, happening every year would be pretty exciting. All right. Other questions?
Any other folks want to raise hand or drop something in the chat? Um, so much talk about conferences is a good plug for our Stone Living Lab 2027 conference coming up. We're honing in on a date right now, but we'll either be in March or April 2027 at UMass Boston. So trying to create that type of environment and atmosphere you're talking about, David. So
Yeah,
thank you.
you bet.
Any other questions or thoughts or comments for David?
Hey, Sonia.
Hey, thank you so much. Really, really
You
interesting.
bet.
I was just wondering if you have had a chance to look either abroad or around the country at great models that we might learn from.
Ah, such a good question, and you're hitting at a point where, I've been here 4 months. It was on my list to pull together exemplars of this kind of stuff, and with all the just transition here, I have not been able to do that. I'm hopefully going to be able to hire someone who can do a more comprehensive look at that. With that said, I did join a group that has the worst acronym ever. And I just got an email from them today. UEILC. It's like University Energy Institute Collaborative. And basically it's a collaborative of institutes at universities like the Salata Institute, et cetera. And I was hoping that, okay, that could be, again, a network that I could participate in and learn from. But it's definitely on my list to kind of figure out. And they're one model I'm very, very familiar with, because it's what I studied as part of my PhD, is the agricultural extension system. And that is the classic that actually does this really well. Of course, it's 150 years old. It's been tested. It's always had federal and state funding support. But it's really a system that has figured out how to link the problems of a farmer with the research expertise at the lab back at the land-grant university. And it has the organizational structures to make that happen. And so that's one example, but I know that there's trying to think. The Kennedy School has something that's called, and it started at Stanford, called the Impact Lab. And basically they give funding for research projects, sort of like I've described. And I don't know it that well yet, but they also do a lot of coaching and training and requirement of connecting with stakeholders in pretty fundamental ways. Do you have ideas? Are there particular of these kind of
I was
institutes?
just thinking of some of the places in Europe, in Copenhagen and places like that, where there is this, sort of robust testing and interface between researchers and real practical needs of the community. But maybe we ought to think about a session at our upcoming Stone Living Lab conference where we can invite some of the leaders
That'd be cool.
and have a good session.
Yeah. I just launched a speaker series here called I should know the Climate Action Clinic, where research meets practice. And the idea is to bring in 2 or 3 times a semester people who have done this. So actually the first one is going to be next week, featuring the team that I mentioned that did the carbon border adjustment mechanisms. But the next one, and that one is actually not open to public, but the next one is Shalonda Baker, who many of you know because she was here. She was here, meaning in Boston. She was at Northeastern, a law professor and a policy professor. And she's now the vice provost of climate and sustainability at University of Michigan and runs an institute like the Salata Institute and has thought a lot about this. That's one. I like your idea about European. They're way ahead of us, as they are in a lot of things. But Paul, you may remember on our trip to Rotterdam I believe it was Rotterdam, we met with the university team that had this incredible modeling thing. What they would do is, so imagine a big screen TV that's, on your computer, and they had it set up that it could fold down. So it was like a tabletop. And then they would get stakeholders around the tabletop with communities. They were working on all kinds of different, like nature-based and green stormwater solutions. And the community members themselves, and I'm sure government officials, could sit around it and be like, oh, if we did a stormwater utility that charged X, Y, and Z, press a button and, oh, this is what the flooding would look like, or this is what the outcome would look like. So in real time simulation, it allowed for decision makers. And I know that there are a bunch of European teams that do that.
That was at Technical University of Delft.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
Yeah. But it was it's a great tool.
Yeah. That display still sticks in my mind. Yeah.
Great question, Sonia, and thank you, David, for those insights. I think we got time for one more, so I see Phil's hand up. Phil, you want to have at it?
Hey, David, good to see you.
Dang, this is old home week.
My question is, I think of the TV commercial that Nature Conservancy has about, speaking for the things that don't have a voice. Speaking up for nature. So how does that stakeholder contingent fit into your process? Because obviously fish and elephants and other things don't vote. And
don't forget the eelgrass, Phil. Speak for the eelgrass.
Yes, that's near and dear to my heart.
I know. Yeah. So how do those without voice get voice in this process I'm thinking of, right? That's what you're asking. Yeah. That's a really good question. And I'm trying to think of the projects that we have where that would be most obvious. And we have, for example, a new biodiversity project. I didn't really talk about it because it hasn't really taken off that much. But I know that they have a team that's looking at rights of nature. And in fact, Harvard just created a new rights of nature. That's not what the name is, but a rights of nature center at the law school that's, has lawyers on it, but also has folks from all over the university, including our folks who are doing indigenous studies and economics and divinity school, et cetera. So that's I think that's the closest that we get to that, but you're reminding me that that's often forgotten. And, the stand-in for that are the groups like the Nature Conservancy and others that are often at the table at the things during the work that we're doing. But that's a very good admonishment. So thank you.
Thank you, Phil. And David, want to just say thank you so much again for joining. That presentation and the Q&A was just fantastic. Really appreciate all the work you're doing and look forward to collaborating with you further. And I want to hand it to Lex to preview next month.
Can I say, before we do that, can I just say one more appreciation? And I see Kathleen is here, and obviously Sonia. And without your vision and support, none of the kind of stuff that's going on here could be happening, and these convenings couldn't happen. So thank you for that.
Well, Dave, I just want to jump in and say, focusing in on taking information from the university and put it into the community and the advocacy work is the key of what we hope to achieve.
Yeah.
So I applaud you and the Institute for this initiative. I also wanted to mention, because so much in environmental protection has been taken apart by this administration, there's a group that's forming with left and right, Republicans and Democrats, to say we are going to have to put it together again, no matter who wins the presidential election. And what should our regulatory systems be when we do that? And it shouldn't matter if we do it right, whether a Democrat or a Republican would win. It's really an effort to do that. It's called Ground Shift. And I'd like to see more of their work in the conference.
Great.
It's just begun, and I'll get you some information on it.
Yeah, that'd be great. I actually think there's like a huge opportunity with all of the backwards direction we've gone and the destruction of a lot of our already existing legislative, framework. Wow, now's the opportunity to think differently and think big and transformative.
And that's exactly what this group is trying to do. And not premised on left or right, but what is the absolutely dream answer. And in many ways, when you get working, people do have common concerns and common solutions.
Yep.
Anyway, ground.
Fantastic.
But thank you for doing what you're doing, and we hope to be part of the community that you look to.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, David. And Lex, close us out. Thank you all for joining.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, David. So next month's seminar is going to be on April 16th, and it will feature Ali Putnam, who's a postdoctoral research associate at UMass Boston, whose research focuses on how warming and extreme events affect invertebrates and seaweeds. And we'll be posting event details and registration on our website and socials soon. So yeah, thank you all so much for joining us.
Great.
Thanks, Lex. Thank you all.